We're going to talk a little about retail reopening right now with shoppers coming back to stores, investors wondering if e-commerce can sustain the surge it experienced during the pandemic. And to answer that question and so many more, joining us right now is Harley Finkelstein. He is the president of Shopify. Shopify digitally supports well over now 1 million merchants worldwide. It's great to see you, Harley. We've talked a lot over the years, or over the past year, I should say, about the idea of the pull forward. And so the real question is that pull forward sustainable? And what are you starting to see, even in the last couple of weeks at this point?
Hey, Andrew, great to be on the show and good to see all of you back together. A couple of things I think it's important to understand about retail. There's supply side and there's demand side of retail. And I want to start on the supply side of retail. I mean, the merchants, the entrepreneurs. One thing that we have not really talked about in the past year together is that 2020 put the spotlight on a type of entrepreneur that has been around for a long time, but never really had a name before. And the name of it is the forced entrepreneur. We talk a ton about, needing passion to start a business, but there's this other catalyst for becoming an entrepreneur, which is survival. I mean, that's my story. I started a business to help put myself through school and support my mom and sisters. And that's Toby's story, who moved to Canada and entrepreneurship was his only option as a new immigrant, and that led to Shopify. So although forced entrepreneurship may sound negative, it's not. Forced entrepreneurs actually become entrepreneurs to survive, and studies have shown that they are more likely to build a successful business because they have to. So let's talk about what we're seeing right now. This pandemic, as we talked about, all these challenges came out of nowhere. Right. As a result, thousands of new entrepreneurs emerged. We saw new store creations on Shopify increase by about 80% in 2020 versus 2019. In the United States alone, 4.4 million businesses were created last year. That's a 24% increase on the year before. And just last week, 2 businesses on Shopify, Oatly and Figs, who started as small businesses, actually went public. So that's the supply side. On the demand side, in terms of what's happening with the consumer, there's a 5.4% increase in spending on goods, accounting for most of the growth. That's a very promising sign. And the last consumer confidence numbers also show a very optimistic outlook, holding steady to highest in the last 14 months. When you look at places, though, like Australia or New Zealand that have now emerged on the other side of the pandemic, where things are going back to normal, you do not see retail going back to the way it was, to the status quo. In fact, you still see elevated levels of retail, and particularly digital retail. So there's a lot to be optimistic about here.
So, but in terms of just growth, I'm talking about in the United States, can you give us any kind of visibility into what the numbers have looked like, even in the last 3 weeks?
No slowdown whatsoever from our perspective. In fact, more brands are starting to sell more products. A lot of the businesses, my wife's a foodie, and it was just it was our anniversary, so I want to get her something special. So I want to get her a book from French Laundry. What I noticed is you take this iconic American restaurant like the French Laundry that had to close during the pandemic, and they now have a full-fledged online store on Shopify selling products and cookbooks and kitchenware. So in fact, I don't think we're going to see us going back to an old version of retail. I think this new paradigm shift will remain. And I think the major thing for people to understand is that the center of gravity is now online first, not offline first.
Harley, as you know, last week, the District of Columbia brought a lawsuit against Amazon, calling it a monopoly. Do you believe Amazon's a monopoly?
I think for the future of retail to be interesting and exciting, it needs to be in the hands of the many, not the few. One of the things that you're seeing on Shopify, we now have more than 1.7 million stores. We're about 9 or 10% of total e-commerce in the U.S. Every one of those stores is independent. And I think what consumers are showing that they want to do is they want to buy direct from independent stores, not necessarily go to a single place that is centralized.
But are you an example of, are you Amazon's defense at this point? I mean, look at your success over the last year. If you're Amazon, do you say, look at those guys over there? We're not a monopoly. We're not doing anything. There's competition here.
I think you can have two versions of retail. I think you can have a version of retail where people go to one place to buy their staple goods, their toilet paper and detergent and toothpaste. And for those marketplaces are great places to do that. It's convenient, it's fast. But if you want to buy a great hoodie or a cool pair of Allbirds sneakers or a pair of socks from Bombas, you're not going to the marketplaces. You're going direct to the actual independent merchants, and Shopify powers that. So I think the two can exist, but I think more and more consumers want to buy direct to consumer.
If the Department of Justice calls you, you're going to testify against Amazon?
I can't speak to that.
You can't what?
I can't speak to that. I don't know the details of that, and I don't know what I would say if they called.
Okay, fair enough.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.